Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Welcome to this APFIC webinar, and thank you very much for joining us. My name is Susana Siar. I'm a Fishery and Aquaculture Officer at the FAO Regional Office for Asia and the Pacific in Bangkok. Let me start by providing you with a brief introduction to this webinar. Next slide, please. So this is under the Asia Pacific Fishery Commission webinar series if you are joining us for the first time. The COVID-19 pandemic has affected the work of the Commission and prevented us from convening the Regional Consultative Forum meeting, which is usually held back-to-back with the Commission meeting. The last meeting that we had was in the Philippines, in Cebu in 2018. And we were supposed to have convened the meeting in 2020, but because of the COVID-19 pandemic was unable to. So the APFIC Secretariat has restarted activities through virtual events, webinars, and workshops. And we have partnered with INFOFISH to develop a technical webinar series based on the work program and priorities of the APFIC region. And this webinar series is open to all interested fisheries and aquaculture stakeholders. These are recorded and will be made available for viewing online at the INFOFISH YouTube channel. Next slide, please. Today's webinar is on the characteristics and performance of co-management in Asia and is already the 8th webinar in the series. So if you missed the other 7 webinars, you may view the recording online. And this webinar is convened to look at the research findings of a joint FAO WorldFish publication on the topic. And during the course of the webinar, we will hear perspectives and experiences from government, civil society, and a practitioner, as well as look at the challenges and opportunities for co-management as a key approach for managing small-scale fisheries and the way forward. Now, 2022 has been declared by the United Nations General Assembly as the International Year of Artisanal Fisheries and Aquaculture, and FAO is leading the activities for advocacy on the International Year. So in this regard, an international steering committee was already formed, of which Indonesia is a member country of this international steering committee. So we have invited a representative from the Embassy of Indonesia in Rome to give us information about the international year. We call IAFA 2022 to encourage member countries and stakeholders to participate in this international year. We would kindly request your active participation through the poll questions. We will have 2 sets of poll questions in this webinar. Next slide, please. Okay, so this is how the webinar will flow. After this brief introduction, I will hand over the floor to our colleagues at INFOFISH for the guidelines for participation. After that, we will have 2 poll questions, which will then be followed by the first presentation by Philippa, or we call her Pip Cohen, program leader at WorldFish, who will tell us about the highlights of the FAO WorldFish publication, Characteristics and Performance of Fisheries Co-Management in Asia. Then this will be followed by a presentation by Mrs. Kang Kim. She is Deputy Director General of the Fisheries Administration in Cambodia, who will tell us about the performance of small-scale fisheries co-management in Cambodia. Then we will hear the perspective from civil society organization. Sebastian Matthew, Executive Director of the International Collective in Support of Fish Workers, will give us a presentation. Next slide, please. After Sebastian's presentation, we will hear from John Kurian, a visiting professor at Azim Premji University in Bangalore, India, on his reflections on fisheries co-management. And John's presentation will then be followed by 2 questions on Mentimeter poll. After this, after the poll, we will then move on with the presentation by my colleague Welena Westland. She's an international fisheries analyst at FAO for the ideas and way forward. And then we will have the intervention on the International Year of Artisanal Fisheries and Aquaculture 2022 by Mr. Chaka Awal. He is coordinator for multilateral affairs of the Embassy of the Republic of Indonesia in Rome. And she is actually joined here with us by Ms. Nona Gailuna, who is the first secretary of the Embassy of the Republic of Indonesia in Rome. After each of the presentations, we will have, if time permits, we will have 1 or 2 questions. And then after all the presenters have presented their presentations, we will then move to the general Q&A and then the closing of this webinar. So at this stage, I would like to hand over the floor to our colleagues in INFOFISH. Sujit, please.
Yes. Thank you, Dr. Susana. Hello, everyone. I welcome all the participants from various parts of the world to this APFIC webinar number 8, Characteristics and Performance of Co-Management in Asia. I'd like to remind some of the guidelines for the participants for making the webinar successful and interactive. 1. Like other webinars, we'll have a general question and answer session after all the presentations, and the moderator will select some of the questions and address to the panelists. You see, there will be there is a chat option in this Zoom webinar platform, but the chat messages are not moderated, and so kindly limit technical messages here only. And the webinar recording will be available after this event, and it will be available on the INFOFISH official YouTube channel. So you can also view after the event if you miss, if anyone missed this event. And after immediately of my presentation, you will see 2 Zoom all questions. We appreciate if you kindly respond to that. Your feedback will be valuable for us. And we also do apologize for that, like other APFIC webinars, we have no arrangement for the certificate of participation of this webinar. And I would like to thank you again for your kind presence to this important webinar. Thank you, and over to you, Ms. Dr. Susana.
Thank you very much, Sujit. And Aftar has already posted the poll questions. I see it now on my screen. So if you could just, participants, could you please respond to the question? There are 2 questions. Please respond to both questions, and we will look at the results after the first presentation.
Hi all. Shall I proceed, Susana?
I'll give it a brief one. Pip, okay. So yes, thank you very much. And we will look at the results later. So at this stage, I would like to hand over the floor to Pip Cohen for her presentation on the highlights of the publication. Pip, please.
Hi all. Thanks so much for joining us. It's a shame that we can't be together to have some really good conversations in person, but thank you for joining remotely. As you can see by my slide and from the introduction from Susana, I'm presenting a report. It's a synthesis of knowledge and also case studies. And on the left-hand side, you can see the list of authors that I had the privilege of working with to pull together this report. So what I'm presenting to you now belongs to all of those authors. who come from Bangladesh, Cambodia, Philippines, Sri Lanka, and more countries. So I guess let's start with what are we talking about when we say co-management? So co-management is a collaborative process of fisheries governance. So it's a collaborative arrangement between management partners, most commonly between a government body, who is actively supporting, involving and empowering resource users. So in this case, fisheries resource users and the beneficiaries of fisheries in designing, implementing and regulating management arrangements. So fisheries co-management is distinctly different from centralised governance arrangements. So centralised governance arrangements are where fisheries management is designed, implemented and enforced by national or subnational government agencies. So fisheries departments, fisheries ministries or fisheries authorities, as we know. But it is a little more complicated than that. So this figure, which is redrawn from Sen and Nielsen and their publication in 1996, it shows that co-management is a spectrum. So it's a spectrum of governing responsibility and power between, on one end, the government and their management responsibilities, and on the other end, the user group and their management responsibilities. At one end of the spectrum, if the government was particularly powerful and dominant in management, this might be called instructive management, where the process of management or governance tends to be government informing the resource users on the decisions that they have made about how the fishery might be managed. On the other end is informative management, where the government has fully delegated authority to make decisions to the user group who are responsible for management, and where the government is really only providing information to support the community or resource users' efforts. So in reality, many co-management arrangements sit somewhere in the middle here and can vary through time. So there's substantial variation in the systems to which co-management is applied and the degrees of inclusion, agency, influence, and authority of the different managing partners. So the reason we're here and the reason that there's a whole seminar dedicated to this is that co-management is now considered by many policies and governors as a mainstream and favoured approach for governing complex social ecological systems like fisheries. And it's recognised and recommended by global commitments, including the voluntary guidelines for securing sustainable small-scale fisheries in the context of national food security and poverty eradication, that we more commonly call the small-scale fisheries guidelines. So because co-management is now so well accepted and mainstream in many countries, it's an important time for us to see how things are going. So this is the reason that with FAO, we did a review with experts that are embedded in co-management processes in a range of countries. So those experts that I was talking about, the ones that their names are on the first slide. So the first stage of this study was to review the literature, probably including reports from other presenters who you'll hear from today, or probably including reports from many people that are listening now. The second stage was to understand the national level approaches to co-management in 4 countries. So we looked at Bangladesh, Cambodia, Philippines, and Sri Lanka. And then the third stage was a deeper dive into case studies in each of these countries. And these sites spanned inland and marine contexts and spanned a wide range of fisheries systems that were operating in large lakes, alongside rice fields, marine and estuarine waters, and coral-dominated coastal waters. And they included management of single species or multi-species fisheries as well. So really, we want to answer this question: does co-management work? But I would always answer this question with another question: for what objective precisely? From whose perspective? And for which type of fisheries system? So to break up the answer, like we really need to, in answering that, does co-management work? We used a number of indicators. So they spanned the natural system, the people and their livelihoods, and the institutions and governance. So we looked at answering that question from all of these different perspectives. So these were all the different indicators that we were looking for evidence in those written reports that many of you would have contributed over the years. So the numbers in parentheses there were those that Louisa Evans observed in a review that was completed in 2011. And the numbers following that are the number of observations that we found in the literature that we examined. So our review ultimately looked at 63 different reports, which examined 105 different unique cases of co-management in one of the 4 countries. So these are the results. So it's a very rapid look at what we found. So this graph on the top shows the top 5 or the most commonly reported indicators that describe the process of co-management. And on the bottom are the top 6 actually, well, the top 5 plus I've added food security there, that describe or that show the outcomes that were reported about co-management. If the trend that was reported was positive, then it shows up in the green on the right. And if the trend was negative, then it shows up in the blue on the left. So as you can see in the process indicators, so things like participation, rule compliance, influence, the trend in illegal fishing, and communication and information exchange, co-management was largely found to be generating really positive outcomes for communities and for fishers. The second set of results is about outcomes. So here we're looking at fisheries yield and harvest, household income, resource status, and household well-being, which generally, as you can see, because most of the results showed up on the right in the green, tended to be positive. So the reports found generally that co-management was improving fishery yield and harvest. The exception was in the bottom there, it was about access to resources and food security. I've added food security there. It wasn't reported very commonly. But those 2 indicators showed generally kind of 50-50 split, that co-management wasn't necessarily leading to positive outcomes for people for fishers or for fishing communities as they experienced it. So you can see there that we as a community of people who are interested in or facilitating or understanding or improving co-management and the way in which we work with communities really still need to do some work around some of those trade-offs that we're seeing. One of the reasons that co-management is popular or even encouraged, particularly by governments, is that it's understood that co-management leads to greater levels of compliance, because the fishers who are fishing have been involved in the decisions about and the implementation of the very rules that are managing their own fisheries activities. So we found that co-management did have higher levels of buy-in. So people really felt that they were part of the management process, and then there were higher levels of compliance with co-management. In the Sri Lanka and Philippines cases, there needed to be higher level authorities, so national governments or provincial governments supporting compliance and enforcement measures, and that the pressures on the fishery were outside of the control or the enforcement capabilities of, say, a more community-based management arrangement. In Cambodia in particular, and this is seen in other regions as well, co-management was serving as a pathway to claim or to assert rights over resources and areas. So rights that may have been informal otherwise. However, one of the shortcomings of this is that exclusion of outsiders may not address the root causes of the resource challenges that are being experienced. So enforcement is necessary for success, but we found that some cases had a really narrow singular focus on enforcement and that this could be problematic. A heavy-handed approach to enforcement may actually undermine the social welfare and well-being objectives that are often part of co-management arrangements. So national and international commitments have been made to advance gender equity, women's empowerment, and socially equitable processes and outcomes. And so it was important for us to add this layer of analysis in this report. So some of these commitments are that in the FAO facilitated small-scale fisheries guidelines that suggest that all parties, all management parties, should recognise that achieving gender equality requires concerted efforts, and it should be an integral part of small-scale fisheries development strategies. Also, that states should endeavour to secure equal participation in decision-making processes for policies and management arrangements directed towards small-scale fisheries. So in looking at the cases in the literature, we found that co-management practice and evaluation appeared to increasingly recognise these commitments to gender equality, but that we weren't quite making it yet. So it was a good start, a good try perhaps, but there was still a long way to go. Now I've highlighted this box here around attending because this is where some of the efforts seem to stop. They looked at whether women were in attendance at particular co-management meetings, but we really need to look much more broadly than that. And so I use here a simple framework that was developed by a colleague, Danica Kleiber, to suggest that we really need to look at how gender equitable our processes of understanding, of sharing different perspectives and objectives about management, about different people's views and objectives being valued, and how equitable ultimately are decision-making processes. So we also looked at that national level, and all of the countries that we looked at had institutional and policy changes that were either accommodating co-management or were enabling or bolstering co-management arrangements. So in that they would delegate, formally delegate power to control the access and use of particular water bodies, that there was formal recognition of co-designed management arrangements. So these weren't just considered as like a community's management arrangements. These were considered as incredibly legitimate and for everybody to respect. And that formal processes were recognised, particularly those that encouraged consultation and collaboration between multiple actors or stakeholders, including government, NGOs, the broader community and the fishers themselves. And despite these institutional adjustments, we were still seeing in some cases that co-management was projectized. So it was still appearing as a project, which meant that when a project finished, the co-management arrangements were a little bit fragile and may break up or may not sustain beyond the life of the project. We also saw in many cases that there were challenges outside of what the community had previously experienced. So they could have been upstream developments like damming or environmental disasters that were outside of the control or the agency or the mandate of co-management and needed additional help from other agencies for communities or for fisheries to experience sustainability or broader well-being. So to rapidly sum up, and I should say as well that this report is very close to being released, so thanks for being patient and listening to a snapshot of what we found. There is a lot more in that report, and I would really look forward to discussing, including with this panel, whether some of these findings that we accumulated and synthesized resonate with what's happening in different cases and in cases that people are more experienced with. So in sum, we found that co-management was widespread. It was incredibly diverse. The way in which co-management played out was very different in different contexts. And in fact, that's what is presented as its strength. It was very dynamic. It would change through time. The outcomes, the processes would change through time, as would the co-management arrangements themselves. We still were seeing some limits in terms of the sustainability of management arrangements, particularly in the face of governance shocks or political pressures or economic pressures. Still some challenges in terms of inclusivity, particularly around gender. So while co-management performs well for inclusivity generally, it can, if not facilitated well or managed well, it can exacerbate existing inequalities, including gendered inequalities. Co-management was not necessarily always robust to external drivers. So putting too much weight on the performance of co-management to be a cure-all for all the pressures on fisheries or communities would be a real risk. And we also found some shortcomings in evaluation. So as a science community, for those of us who are in the research community, and for government agencies as well, stepping up in terms of evaluation and that feedback loop to adaptive management, I think, is an area that needs further work. So a range of measures inside co-management and beyond it as well are needed to complement fisheries and community needs and rights. And as I was saying, fisheries systems are subject to a range of pressures and influencing factors, and so can fluctuate substantially through time, irrespective of the presence of co-management. So that whilst fisheries agencies are key in working with fishing communities, also agriculture, health, disaster response, water, rural development need to remain responsive to external drivers that communities and fisheries are experiencing. I guess I put forward then these challenge questions for what next, which I would enjoy discussing if we were able to have a coffee now to discuss, where to really from here. So firstly, I think we as a community need to identify what are the priority areas in which we need to generate critical reflection and support to improve co-management. The second is, what do small-scale fisheries co-management experiences have to offer to these transformative agendas that we're hearing about so much? So the blue economy or food systems transformations or changing agricultural landscapes or the increasing pressure of climate change and the ways in which adaptive capacity should be built in preparation for the impacts of climate change. And then the third is we do need additional bolstering and response to community and fisheries needs. And how do we facilitate that? We as perhaps a fisheries biased audience, how do we make sure that we're playing this linking role to enable multiple services to be reaching communities and for community voice to be reaching those multiple services? And where might we need to be radically rethinking the dominant co-management model? So in the review that we found, which may be a result of the way in which we approached the review, was that we're still seeing maybe a community-based model of co-management as being the predominant model. So where in which do we need to see co-management that moves further up the value chain, for example? Thanks so much.
Many thanks, Pip, for walking us through the highlights of the report. And as you mentioned, it is almost near publication. And for all the audience, when we get the publication online, we will request INFOFISH to send all the registered participants the link to the publication. Just one quick, okay, sorry. They already shared the results of the poll. I was actually going to ask a question first, but it's interesting to see which type of institution are you affiliated with, and the highest that we got is from government, followed by international organization, then the academic research institution, then we have non-government organization and the private sector. and other organizations, but we do not have anybody from the small scale fisheries organization. And the next result is, do you have co-management arrangements for small scale fisheries in your country? And the highest is the yes, it is the most common arrangements for small scale fisheries, according to 43%, followed by yes, it exists, but it's not broadly used. And then 15% said no, there are no co-management arrangements. And then the 7% yes, but only on a trial scale. Pip, your thoughts on the second result?
Yeah, so the second result being that co-management, that most of the attendees, co-management is a dominant or main management model, or that it does exist, but it's not prevalent, I think was the, I mean, I think it's a little bit of perhaps a result of the sample, in that those that are interested in co-management will attend a co-management panel. But I think as well that does show that, you know, co-management, I mean, it's very broad, but it's not going anywhere. And I think us critically reflecting on where it's performing well, what our roles, you know, need to be in improving it, and in ensuring that it leads to well-being of the resource and resource users and rights holders is a really relevant and important question. And I think we probably need to be reflecting on it more frequently with a broad range of stakeholders. So really happy to see how many government representatives are here, but also it is a bit of a concern that we really need some more fishers organisations in this discussion, because you know, that spectrum that I showed, it shows co-management isn't going to be co-management if we don't have that strong engagement from the resource and rights holders.
Okay, just another quick question, Pip, and this refers to the results that you found, that actually the access to resources was significant, but in the negative direction. Yeah, and what could be behind this?
Yeah. So, I mean, commonly we found a very common management measure are small area closures or seasonal closures or periodic closures. And so any type of closure, its deliberate purpose is to limit access for a particular group of people, or for a particular period of time, for a period of time when the resource is particularly vulnerable, for example. So it's not unexpected. I think we really need to dig into that a lot more to understand what was the consequence of that limited access. Was it, did it have economic or food nutrition security ramifications? And was it effective in giving the resource time to recover and increase in productivity? So I think there's some key questions that we can answer with different types of data sets. And I think some people have, you know, answered them. I know perhaps the next speaker on Cambodia and the use of community fish refuges, which would fall into that category, are important areas for us to look at.
Thank you very much, Pip. And about the questions that you showed in your last slide, we may be able to go back to that during the Q&A, and we would like to hear also the panel's take on those. So thank you. I would like to request Sebastian, if he could do his presentation now. Is it okay, Sebastian? Sebastian, you're on mute.
Yeah, Susana, sorry. Yeah, I can. Would you like to wait a couple of minutes, or should I?
I think we just go ahead with your presentation, and then we'll have her after your presentation.
Yes, please. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you.
She might be experiencing poor internet connection. Okay.
Yeah. Can I start, Susana? Yeah.
Please, over to you, Sebastian.
Yeah. Yeah. So, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everybody. And thank you, the APFIC Secretariat, for inviting ICSF to this important meeting. And I think the importance is well captured in the presentation by Pip, that seems to be a dominant kind of a modality of resource management in the APFIC region. So I would like to start with the guidelines, because the guidelines very clearly give direction to all actors, stakeholders about how to approach co-management. So it says that it should be recognized, it should be promoted, and then it talks about the role of the community in co-management. And most importantly, the third point, it talks about the roles and responsibilities within the context of co-management arrangements. So I think this is probably an area which we need to further develop based on the experience and history of co-management in the region. So what are the roles? What are the responsibilities? How do we clarify these kind of roles and responsibilities? So we consulted with the World Forum of Fisher Peoples, and we also consulted with the World Forum of Fish Harvesters and Fish Workers. So the World Forum of Fisher Peoples also believe that a co-management system contributes to all the three pillars of sustainable development and also to good governance. And they also believe that small-scale fishing communities and fish workers are to be part of the co-management arrangements in a meaningful manner. When it comes to the World Forum of Fisher Peoples, they are a little more strong. They're saying that it's an important management tool, and with a caveat that it should be rightly implemented. And then they go on to say that fishing communities should own the resources and manage their activities through community-based resource management or co-management. So they also recognize that the community is a key element in co-management, and the co-management should lead to the communities owning the resources. That is a key position coming from the World Forum of Fisher People. And then they go on to say that co-management structures should recognize the rights of fishing communities and indigenous peoples to have an equal voice in decision-making processes, and their ownership and control over resources and territories. So therefore, the important role of the community is what they're highlighting, and the political empowerment of fishing communities to undertake this task. And then we looked into some of the initiatives in India in 2006 to 2008, and then again in 2011 by the FAO and the United Nations tsunami recovery kind of a support. So there also very large kind of a consultation was organized of civil society, particularly fishing communities, into what kind of co-management can be useful in the Indian context. And I mean, here I would like to also draw your attention to the fact that these projects have now led to the administrative orders and legislation coming out of 3 provinces of India to take the key lessons of this project forward. So I think it's interesting that a project approach has now transformed into a legislative approach. So I think it's very interesting development of how a project can change the national approach to resource management. So here you can see that they're talking about the state's role is to build a ground-up consensus. And the purpose should be the realization of self-regulation and management of fisheries based on a combination of science and traditional knowledge. So therefore, they try to see how to merge the two. And then it talks about the importance of recognizing the traditional arrangements and negotiated arrangements. So examples of traditional arrangements are like some communities having a right to seabed to operate certain fishing gear, some communities having access to right to resources being recognized at the community level, and then sections of the coast to operate certain fishing gear, then certain landing centers in some provinces of India. Then, so these are the kind of traditional rights they talk about. And then it comes to negotiated fishing effort. There are various examples of 4 days, one particular gear group, and 3 days another gear group. Then there will be a prohibition of night fishing at the community level. There will be mesh size regulations. There will be minimum size for the fish landing. So there are various measures which the communities have negotiated and implementing at the community level. So these projects also talk about how these traditional and negotiated arrangements should become key building blocks for co-management systems and approaches and structures. And then it further talks about the existence of various community-based structures. Maybe some are very strong, some are not so strong. But then these have to be recognized, these have to be strengthened as entry points for fisheries co-management. Therefore, this is mainly a bottom-up, a ground-up approach, along with local self-government institutions, because in many countries you have devolution to the local self-government institutions, and these devolutionary kind of power can be used for strengthening the community participation in fisheries. And then it also talks about how it is still in a very inchoate state. I think that's also captured in PIP's presentation, that it has various forms, various kind of definitions, and there is no proper convergence. So therefore, we need to see the existing status of fisheries co-management as the final state or final shape of fisheries co-management. So we need to keep on working on the design aspects, and therefore an evolutionary approach, learning from your experience can be attempted. And then we just did a quick survey of the co-management in the APFIC region. So it's very clear that there are various initiatives for community-based co-management, area-bound co-management, fisheries co-management, biodiversity hotspots co-management, integrated co-management of fishery ecosystems in the internal waters, territorial sea, and the adjacent land, mostly localized. I mean, these examples I have actually seen from the FAO Lex. In fact, a very interesting, there are about 360 entries in the FAO Lex on co-management, which is very, very, very impressive. So I think one can see this kind of various types being captured in the FAO Lex, and I think this is a source that people should definitely use. And then it talks about what kind of actors are included. There are community associations, there are fishery associations, and then if you look at Pacific Islands, Papua New Guinea in particular, traditional user owners are actually part of the co-management arrangement. Then fishers cooperatives are part of the co-management, examples from India. And then it also talks about the fact that this is, I mean, generally one can recognize in the APFIC region that, there is recognition of co-management in law, but there is, of course, as I mentioned earlier, room for greater coherence. And right now, the legislation and policies are mainly focused on sharing responsibilities. So what they call partnership model for the conservation of aquatic resources, but it is less focused on sharing authority and power. This is an important element of the definition of co-management that we refer to, and therefore sharing the authority, power, and benefits of co-management, I think, have to be better captured in the co-management systems. So then in the APFIC region, again, you can see that, it's also mentioned by PIP that this project approach, and then it's also can be seen that there is no execution of legally binding agreements. In fact, if you look at some of the developed country implementation of co-management, you can see that they have an execution of legally binding agreements detailing the duration, terms and conditions for the co-management between the government and the body to whom the delegation of management responsibility is intended, like if a board is created for co-management, for example. So this is, I think, an example, an experience of developed countries, perhaps the developing countries can learn from. I mean, I have in mind Australia, New Zealand, Canada, USA. You know, these are interesting examples of how this kind of a binding agreement can be drawn. And then there is also a lack of sustainable financing mechanisms, because this again in 2005 in the APFIC co-management workshop, mainstreaming co-management workshop, it was mentioned that there is a need to develop financing mechanisms for co-management. So I think this is again something which we need to keep in mind. And then if you see in terms of further raising the profile of co-management approach systems and structures. So there are various recommendations we would like to make, that in addition to evolutionary co-management, one can think of adaptive co-management, coherent, you know, so all different definitions converging. And right now, in many contexts, even Pip mentioned that gender is a weak element. So we need to focus on gender equity issues, issue of power relationship. There will be different, fishing power for different gear groups. How do we try to bring some kind of equity within that? Scaling up, do you work at the very local level, or you scale it up to the national level? Do you work across different gear groups? How do you look at incompatible gear? You know, what kind of arrangements are required? And then how do you look at migration of fishers? And during the COVID time, this was a big issue, migration happening. So if you create sort of certain barriers, how does it sort of impact the migrant fishers? And what about disasters, natural disasters, human disasters, and then pathogen-induced disasters like, you know, COVID, for example. So these are the, again, we have to see how this can be looked at from the co-management approach. And then we have to move from only sharing responsibility regime to sharing responsibility, authority, and benefits regime. So therefore, this is a major shift, I think, probably we need to think about. So this probably is a progressive implementation of co-management over a period of time, can move from one to the other end, like responsibility, authority, and benefits, all the three combined. And when you talk about innovative financial mechanisms to develop and support co-management, again, I just wanted to share the example which I saw in Bangladesh, that they have a provision to use conditional cash transfers for co-management of fisheries resources in their riverine kind of management areas called Jal Mahals. It's an interesting example that we can also try to see how the social protection measures can also tie up with the resource management, co-management arrangements, so on and so forth. And then also to create a co-management area. And then if you don't address the threats coming from the blue economy, when the resources are shared with the new entrants into the marine space, if you talk about seascape approach, landscape approach, all these have various implications for the community. So therefore, how do the external threats facing the small-scale fisheries effectively hedged or addressed by by the state authorities is very important. Therefore, co-management arrangement cannot exist in isolation. It needs the strong state support to also address the external threats. And then in conclusion, there are various outcomes that one can think of that, very important, that nutrition and food security, gender equity, social development, decent work, and disaster mitigation are captured into its outcomes. And these are, again, not really sufficiently reflected in existing arrangements. And then again, access to resources, access to markets. So therefore, we can access to resources, then value chain approach, how the SDGs are reached are very important. How can these benefits be extended to inland and small-scale artisanal fishing communities is very important. And then most of the rights of the fishing communities are kind of pre-colonial, or before people started managing fisheries in a formal way. So therefore, the inherent rights of fishing communities need to be protected. There's towards conservation or sustainable use of biodiversity, and provisions are to be made to accommodate the livelihood needs of migrant fishers and fish workers. And we can also see, as the guidelines suggest, how co-management arrangements can also be used to address IUU fishing and destructive fishing practices. And last but not the least, traditional institutions are to be made more equitable. I mean, there are traditional institutions which also might have various kind of issues to overcome. For example, gender bias of many traditional institutions need to be rectified and made more gender sensitive and robust. And the state institutions likewise may have to recognize the long-term role of fishing communities in sustainable fisheries and resource management. Therefore, the state has to also see how increasingly the power can be given to the fishing communities, that they can manage the resources by themselves. And how do we, from a long-term point of view, move in that direction? That would be very important. Yeah. And just would like to acknowledge Vivekanandan, who worked with the FAO project and very actively promoting co-management in India and influencing government policies. And Mr. Moderator, who coordinated the FAO UNTRS and FIMSL project. Edith Rudith Lukanka, co-president of WFF, and Nadine Nembad, who is the co-chair of WFFP, and Emmanuel Lucci from the International Planning Committee for Food Sovereignty, who coordinated the inputs from the two civil society, two fish worker organizations in IPC here. Thank you very much. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Sebastian, for putting together the perspectives from the civil society and also giving the examples of the co-management arrangements happening. Just to get your thought on the last slide you presented, there was a bullet point about migrants, migrant fishers, and we know that the reality during the this pandemic was that many of these people have returned to their home villages. And how do you see the co-management arrangements being affected by this, and how to incorporate or to integrate the as you say, the needs of fishers who are not there anymore, working in other places, but belong to the village and had to come back during the pandemic? Sebastian.
Yeah, thank you, Susana. I think there are two dimensions to this question. One is, if I lose workers who are part of my fishery, and then the two is, when I migrate back to my village, what kind of fishery is there, and if I can participate in that. So what we have seen in India, especially on the eastern seaboard, is that when they get back to parts of, say, Andhra Pradesh, they get back into fishing. So fishing is providing support to the returning migrants. But then these are, by and large, open access fisheries. There are no co-management structures. So maybe with the experience of these people re-entering fishery, one can see if a co-management arrangement can also lead to some kind of a new perspective on migration, whether you have to migrate at all, whether you can conserve the resources, whether you can have a value chain approach, and then better markets can be provided so that you can address one of the root causes of migration, that there is no opportunity back home. So that can be one approach. And then in the fishing area where they are losing labor, I mean, I'm not really aware of much literature on co-management arrangements where we are talking about capital labor relations. Mostly it is about owner operators managing their fishing grounds or fishing gear or fishing areas. So therefore, we have not yet seen much on how do the owners and how do the workers see the relationship. And so maybe in some areas where there is excessive dependence on large-scale fishing vessels, there's clear labor and owner categories. One can think of this kind of arrangement. But again, whether the workers will be participating in the co-management structure, I think these are all kind of newly developed. Right now, I see that the examples that I'm familiar with are mostly owner operators and communities-based kind of approach, not necessarily worker-owner kind of dichotomy. So therefore, I think that's an area that will be interesting to examine in light of the experience of other countries. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Sebastian. I see that there are a number of questions already in the Q&A. We will go back to that during the general Q&A. And now, thank you very much again, Sebastian. We already have Kim here, and so we will go back to Kim's presentation. Um, Kim, you're ready?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, thank you very much.
Yes, Kim, we will wait for INFOFISH to share your slides.
Yes, thank you very much. I'm very sorry because the internet from my place is very slow. So my presentation will be highlight the experience on the performance of the small scale fishery co-management in Cambodia through the lesson learned from the community fishery arrangement. So next slide is my outlines. I highlight the importance on the small scale fishery in Cambodia. We are linked with the policy reform. And then the second, how is the result of the small scale fishery co-management performance in Cambodia, and then followed by the main challenges in implementing the small scale fishery co-management, and then conclusion and recommendation. Next slide, please. So what are the importance of the small scale fishery in Cambodia? Small scale fishery is defined in the fishery law at the family scale. It refers to those who are using a single fishing gear or a traditional fishing, and generally not for commercial purpose, which are mostly being operated by subsistence fisher and rural people, which is around 80% of the rural poor. Small scale fishery it contributes to around 66% of the total fishery production annually, and its maturity in the freshwater capture fishery, which is almost 100, which is 97.6 of the total freshwater capture fishery, including from the rice field fishery, in which around, next slide please, in which around, next slide please, in which around 60 million people are small-scale fisher, has been involving in full-time and part-time and seasonal employment in the fishery sector. Small-scale fishery has been providing for food security for over 30 million people in the country, and providing over 81% of the animal protein, with high fish consumption estimated around 63% per people per year, especially for small fish and cheap fries, is mostly by small-scale fisher. Next slide, please. Therefore, it is important for the government reform the fishery management in Cambodia because of the small-scale fishery, and hand over to the small-scale fisher to form the community fishery at the co-management approach. So the result from the fishery reform, there are two times, first in year 2000 and second in year 2012. So the abolished fishing lot in the country, especially in the Tune Sub-Great Lakes, the fishing area almost 1 million hectares has been allocated for small-scale fisher, which 10% for conservation and 9% for the small-scale fisher to manage by the small-scale fisher through the community fishery arrangement for their conservation and utilization at this sustainable way. Currently, we have 516 community fishery in the whole country, both inland and marine, at the small-scale fishery co-management approach. Next slide, please. So the legal framework has been provided to support the small-scale fishery arrangement in Cambodia. We call the community fishery organization, which we has royal decree on the community establishment, which in year 2005, and then we have amendment on the fishery law in year 2006, which has one chapter mentioned on the community fishery arrangement, which we have not been before. And we have the sub-degree on the community fishery management, and highlight in the Article 6 that all Cambodian citizens have the right to form the community fishery in their own area on the voluntary basis to take part in the sustainable management, conservation, development, and use of the fishery resources. It is a kind of co-management approach with the technical support from the government, agency, and relevant stakeholders from the national to local level. And then we have the declaration on the community fishery guideline, which provide the guidance to the community fishery arrangement by having their internal rule and bylaw. And also the guidance on the community fishery area agreement with the government, and also the guidance for the preparation of the community fishery area management plan. As a result, of the implementation of the legal framework more than 2 decades, 20 years already since year 2000. So now we have a lot of experience, and then the fishery law is under amendment, and also the sub-degree also will be revised according to our experience. Next slide, please. So I would like to highlight what are the results of performance based on the assessment that the FAA, the Department of the Community Fishery Development Department, has been conducted in year 2018 under EU program funded on the to see to identify the quantity and quality of the visual evidence for the effective operation and performance of the community fishery in Cambodia. So the methodology, we select 292 registered community fishery for conducting the focus group discussion, which we select randomly 10 members of the community fishery per group discussion and per community fishery. The level of performance we measure by which, average, and strong. Which is the which we giving score below 3 points, and average the score from 3 to 4, and strong is about 4 points. And then the weighting is by 4 criteria. The first criteria regarding with the management and operation of the community fishery. The second criteria regarding with the community fishery committee leadership and the impact. And the fourth one is the sustainability of the community fishery management by using a standardized questionnaire. Next slide, please. So the result show that only 9% of the total community fishery has been so that their performance is an effective operation with strong community fishery performance, reaching the 4 criteria with below. The first one is good management and function of the community fishery by having the useful community fishery conservation area. Fishing conflict has been resolved, reduce the illegal fishing activity, and the regular patrolling and the enforcement of the community fishery rule and internal regulation. And the second criteria with strong leadership of the community fishery committee with their capacity and commitment. And the third criteria with good impact of the community fishery, which help to socially and economic benefit rather than being alone. This was also reflected from the result of the community fishery participation assessment done in year 2002 as well, which is funded by the FAO. This one is under the expert from the John Korean, Professor John Korean also, which highlight on the socially important in building trust, working together as and unity to have small scale of poor fisher where economically benefit is getting for access to fishing ground and getting more fish catch and production than before. The last criteria is about the community fishery sustainability. This is highlight the good initiative for the community fishery has been show up for the last 5 years with the community fishery finance and accept right for fair for everyone in the fishing ground. Next slide, please. And the follow the result of the modern has. It is 52% was operating at average active mode with it the moderate community fishery performance, and the witness was around 39% that highlight the community performance was which require more support, both financial and technical, with relevant stakeholders. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. Then what are the main challenges in implementing the community fishery co-management in Cambodia? So the community fishery operation at the small-scale fishery co-management approach is still limited participation and cooperation from the all relevant stakeholders, especially which are not powerful co-manager or local or small-scale fisher or CFI member, including the community fishery committee with limited capacity and resources. The second challenge is the limitation of coordination and support from the technical agency and development partner, leading to the poor implementation of the community fishery management plan. The third one is the impact of the community fishery performance on the fishery conservation, especially for the fish stock and habitat and fish sanctuaries, activity. It requires accountability, greater support, and intervention from technical agency, especially the enforcement of the community fishery rule and regulation. The last main challenge is the community fisheries sustainability is still a question in terms of the community fishery financing for the community fishery plan implementation and their function. So this is very important, which we need to highlight and consider in the amendment of legal framework of the community fishery management that we are under consultation of those legal framework for the community fishery in Cambodia. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. So in conclusion, is that the majority of the inland fishery production is from small-scale fishery. Therefore, the small-scale fishery management is very important to ensure the sustainable small-scale fishery production, utilization, and conservation. We are the community fishery operation at the small-scale fishery co-management approach with strong legal framework, technical and accredited financial support from the government and development partner. In some of the result of the fishery reform implementing for small-scale fishery management, we are the community fishery approach for the 2 decades is achievable and reach at the 200 community fishery target in the strategic plan and framework for the fishery in year 2015 to year 2014. To year 2024, of which 61% of the total community fishery in Cambodia with base community fishery and moderate community fishery performance is considered an average level of function and performance. It indicates that by highlighting the importance of good performance in the community fishery operation and functioning is that the CLI committee capacity and the good impact of the for socially and economic benefit, the sustainability. However, it is requiring the continuing support to ensure the sustainability, with also paying more attention with those with community fishery functioning to ensure secure right to the community fishery management to make responsible use of their fishery resource and take care of their ecosystem so that their food security, their livelihood are secure and in a sustainable manner. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Kim, for sharing us with us the experience from Cambodia and showing us the results of the evaluation. Is it okay to ask? Is your internet okay to ask a quick question, Kim?
Yes.
Okay, Kim, you showed that based on the evaluation, 39% of the CFIs are considered to be having weak performance. So after this evaluation, what actions are being taken now to improve, to strengthen the performance of these weak community fisheries? Over to you,
Thank you
Kim.
very much for the yes. Thank you very much for the question. So this the result of the assessment, the evaluation, is giving the direction for us to take up for the next step to have with community fishery performance. So we can see, we can identify for those which performance, what are the demand, what their demand and need and problem facing. So under this, we can identify their need and their problem in order to tackle and help them in the future. So this make us to prepare the action for them.
Okay. Thank you very much, Kim, and I'm glad that your internet is back. We will probably
No, very sorry about that. Very sorry about that.
No worries. It's good that you were able to share with us the experience from Cambodia. So at this stage, now we are ready for the reflections on fisheries co-management from John Kurian. John, you have the floor.
Can you see?
Yes, please. Yeah.
Can see my screen. Okay. Thank you. Thank you very much. Respected chairperson, my fellow panelists, and the very distinguished members who are participating in this webinar, I must thank you very much for inviting me to this webinar. I will be talking about co-management as dance. And I want to state upfront that my association with fisheries management initiatives in Asia has not been academic in nature. It has been that of a facilitative practitioner. My involvement in fisheries management spans a period of 5 decades, starting in the early 1970s, working with artisanal fishers in India to manage their cooperative fish marketing ventures. Thereafter, after a long gap, I worked in Cambodia between 2004 and 2006 with the Inland Fishery Research Institute and then with the Fisheries Administration to support and stabilize the newly created lacustrine community fishery institutions. And much later, I worked with Mrs. Kang Kim to do some of the evaluations of the progress that was made after 10, 15 years of the implementation. I was in the Aceh province after the tsunami from 2007 to 2011, leading a new fishery co-management initiative for the FAO UN. And then I used to be in Myanmar occasionally between 2015 and 18, helping an NGO working on fisheries co-management. As a practitioner, I have reflected on my practice by writing about it, but not necessarily publishing in academic journals. My written reflections were basically to comprehend what went right, what went not so right, what went wrong, and to make an effort to understand the reasons for these varying outcomes. To me, co-management is, let me state it up front, that to me, co-management is an evolving, dynamic process and a cooperative multi-party initiative with mutual rights and obligations to manage and steward different realms of a fishery. Two gurus of co-management, both very good friends of mine, Robert Pomeroy and Fikret Berkes, about a quarter century ago, in their 1997 article in Marine Policy, compared co-management to the dance called tango. Their article was called Two to Tango. Just take a look. Yes, to tango, two will do. Tangoing requires great skill and precision and some special rules, as you probably gleaned from the brief video clip. But you see, co-management today is not just about two actors, state and community, collaborating for resource management. Co-management has come a very long way from the tango days, and it is a bit more multi-partner, actor-oriented. It needs coordinated activity of many, but with some degree of unison in thought and action. Yet, at the same time, there has to be the freedom to innovate, taking the ecological, social, and cultural facets of the specific context. And this is where the vast potential for co-management lies. Take a look at another approach. Yes, perhaps co-management today is a bit more like the Jerusalem dance. The moment you make this distinction between tango and Jerusalema, co-management attains a certain techno-ecological and socio-cultural specificity and complexity. This is what makes co-management difficult to put into practice and to replicate widely, and certainly not with any common formats or with rigid organizational arrangements. Actually, I'm not aware of any very long-standing and successful, genuine co-management initiative in Asia, which has been practiced across a wide area, such as a whole country or even a whole province within a country. I'm open to correction. From my experience, the closest that would come to this assessment would be the community fisheries in Cambodia. So with this rather unoptimistic statement, let me, in the interest of time, place before you a few of my thoughts based largely on my experience. I have 7 random personal reflections on the essential conditions to make co-management a successful and sustainable long-term option in fisheries management. The first is state regulatory framework and support, which is strong and legally supportive of fisheries co-management. This is a very necessary condition for success. In Cambodia, for example, there is this sub-decree, a legal provision of which is very high in the hierarchy of law, which was passed and which you heard details about earlier. In Aceh, we initiated a participatory process for drafting a new fishery law for the province, in which co-management, but with the support of the 400-year-old customary fishery institution called Panglima Laut, would be given preference as the key institutional arrangement for co-management. But legal framework alone is not an adequate condition. The tacit support of the bureaucracy dealing with fisheries or rural management is also very vital to give concrete expression to the legislative apparatus. And here, again, Cambodia is the only country in Asia where there is a community fishery development department mandated specifically to implement the sub-decree which is intended to foster co-management. The second is community leadership involving women. This is needed for long-term sustainability. Co-management requires strong, innovative, and trustworthy community participation and pressure from below, particularly the committed involvement of women. This is a key to both the spontaneity of initial actions and to the continued fervor of sustained functioning of co-management initiatives. We see many such remarkable cases across Asia in many countries. And if you see a successful co-management initiative, then you can be sure to find women behind it. Thirdly, civil society facilitation, which Sebastian talked about, plays a major role in creating the sustenance for coastal and riparian communities to engage creatively in co-management initiatives. Civil society organizations take interest in activities such as awareness creation, capacity building, undertaking field action, and fostering networks. These are activities which the state is not fully equipped to undertake, and the community either does not have the financial or social capital to initiate. In Aceh province, one of the important reasons for the inability to sustain the co-management initiatives, which were initiated after years of careful planning and implementation, was the total lack of civil society organizations to facilitate some kind of hand-holding in the formative years. But there is a flip side to this. In Cambodia, there are cases of excessive competition between civil society groups to piggyback on the formally established community fishery initiatives, attempting to create a sense of ownership over them. There is also not much genuine cooperation between these NGOs and the Community Fishery Development Department in Cambodia. Now, such an approach is inimical to the concept of co-management, of working together as equals, but with a distinct and different set of capabilities brought to the table of co-management. The fourth is the calibrated negotiation. This is key to formation and sustenance of co-management. And this is irrespective of the presence of legal framework, official support, good leadership, and civil society involvement. Negotiation is required because there is no rigid formula for action. Each partner comes with different expectations and exercises varying power in the governance process. There may also be a very long past organizational history. For example, there may be customary institutions, or there may have been failed cooperatives, and so on. So these initial conditions must be considered. And there is need for a dynamic process of give and take in which the leadership initiative is never always with one partner. The process, for example, may start with awareness creation by officials about the legal framework and encouraging communities to involve, as was in the case in Cambodia. Some communities may be in a circumstance where they will enthusiastically participate and there will be quick acceptance. Then timely support from an NGO may help to work out structure, details, and concrete action points. Thereafter, the state representative may gradually withdraw active participation and only participate in the regular governance meetings. The community leadership may take the lead in the activities until there is an occurrence of conflict, for example, within the community membership over some issues. It could be, for example, about destructive fishing. And then they call the assistance from an NGO for neutral help in the resolution of this conflict. The NGO may suggest involvement of scientific advice. The state representative may initially keep an eye from a distance, but intervene if violations of norms and laws continues. There may be a breakdown of cooperation. The rhythm of the dance breaks. it stops. Timely discussions and negotiations will be needed. Some compromises are made and the dance restarts again. Fifthly, linkage with the meso-level political governance. This is key to fisheries co-management initiatives being incorporated as an identifiable and politically recognizable institutional arrangement of the democratic polity of a country. This is the way to merge into the political economy of a country. These structures are known by various names. Komprek Sahakum in Cambodia, Kecamatan in Indonesia, Panchayat in India, Barangay in Philippines, Grama Niladri in Sri Lanka, Union Parishad in Bangladesh. This meso level of political governance is really where the full real benefit and impact of a small scale fishery is comprehended by political decision makers. You know, the amount of revenue that this fishery generates, the employment it provides, the food and nutrition it delivers, the investment opportunities it harbors, and not least the votes which exist in the community. It is the power of this latter, the votes, which make fishers move from being just beneficiaries to becoming citizens. Co-management initiatives which function well at the local level, village level, need to be networked into this meso level of governance. The strategy and approach adopted to achieve this will vary from country to country for obvious political reasons. But there is one very important common factor to note. In all countries, it is indeed at this meso level that the elected representation of women is most visible. The transition of women involved in co-management, fisheries co-management governance, entering into political governance makes for correcting a big gender bias that will benefit both the fishery sector and the larger economy in which it is located. Sixthly, balancing the motivation and incentive structure between partners of a co-management arrangement is essential for both its present and its future success. Each of the partners have different perspectives, motivations, and incentives for involvement. An open discussion about these aspects right from the very outset of an initiative is necessary. It is vital and necessary to make this as part of the process dynamic for fostering cooperation and collaboration. You know, the questions such as, why are we getting involved in this initiative? What are the differences in our expectations of what we want from this partnership? Can we evolve and agree on a common set of values and principles for working together despite our differences? These are the kind of questions that need to be discussed. And finally, preserving respect and developing mutual trust between partners lies at the core of any co-management initiative. It is not success or failure which matters. It is important that partners realize that co-management is not a technical fix. It is a social process where there will be a flowering open of possibilities. It is only the ingredients which you put into and honestly incorporate in this process that you will be able to envision in the final dance of co-management. And the two most important ingredients are respect for the other and the desire to develop mutual trust. This is what creates hope for honestly making efforts to reach our common goal. Hope should be the orientation of the heart and the spirit. It is cardiac, not cerebral. And remember, it is not necessary that every action undertaken works well. What is important is the certainty that something makes sense regardless of how it turns out. So, friends, I know it is not good to wish for another pandemic, but I wish and I hope that fisheries co-management will become a pandemic and go viral, not as a tango for two, but more like the Jerusalem dance. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, John, for the very enjoyable presentation. John, could you adjust your camera?
Oh,
Yeah.
you don't see me.
We see you, but
Yeah,
yeah,
okay.
that's better. John, just a quick question. And thank you very much for the thoughtful and very creative presentation.
Thank you.
You and Kim mentioned about the importance of the legal framework. My question is, could one, or is it worth initiating a co-management or, building co-management even without it, based on your long years of experience?
You can, and that's what we see all over Asia. We see initiatives at a very local level. But the point is that if you want co-management to be the default option in fisheries in the future, then you can't do it without some kind of legal framework. That's it. And I think Cambodia, there is a whole history to that, which we don't get into now. But Cambodia is an example of how you can start with a top-down approach, but you can make it bottom up and top down contemporaneously.
Thank you very much. We will go back to some more questions after the other presenters. So thanks again. At this stage, we will go to the polls. We have 2 polls questions on Mentimeter. Over to INFOFISH colleagues.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Susana. After, could you please play the Mentimeter polls? Yeah. So I see more than 100 participants yet among with us. So I request all the participants kindly scan the QR code, either scan the QR code for voting to participate in these Mentimeter poll questions, or you can also Google to this URL www.menti.com and use this code to join these Mentimeter poll questions. Thank you.
So participants,
time
please.
Starting, and 30 seconds it will take 30 seconds for each questions. Yeah. Okay.
Not yet, Shujit. Hold on.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, so we see trust, cooperation, collaboration as big letters there.
Yeah.
Can we go to the next poll?
Yeah. Okay.
Question.
Next. Okay. So in the same way, please start voting this question using the code appearing in the screen. Okay.
Okay, thank
So,
you. So,
okay, yeah, we got the word cloud here. So we can now move for the presentation.
yeah, Sujit, INFOFISH will take a photo of that, right?
Okay, thank you. Thank you, After.
Okay. Thank you very much. Inclusion, participation, willingness are some of the big words that were in the word cloud based on the responses. So I think that's a good entry point for the presentation, the next presentation by my colleague, Lena Westland, for on ideas for the way forward. Lena, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Susana and colleagues. I'm going to share my screen. I hope you can see it. I work in FAO and in particular with the implementation of the small-scale fisheries guidelines that have been mentioned several times during this webinar. I find it almost a bit difficult now to make a presentation after these excellent presentations that my colleagues have made. And I'm afraid I don't have music and dance like John had. And also I have to say I don't have a lot of sort of direct co-management experience in the sense that having worked on it in the field that some of the other presenters have been able to contribute. So I'm coming into this then in slightly different angle maybe, and I wanted to talk to you a bit about the small-scale fisheries guidelines and take it from this angle. These small-scale fisheries guidelines, I hope that you all are aware what they are and what they say, but on the odd chance that there may be someone who doesn't know them yet, I just want to introduce them very, very briefly. These guidelines were endorsed by the FAO Committee on Fisheries in 2014, and they are a very comprehensive tool based on a global consensus on how to work with small-scale fisheries governance and development. The guidelines are special in the sense that they go beyond fisheries itself and the fishing, and they also look at other aspects of small-scale fishing community livelihoods, value and the value chain that goes from before actually fishing and all the way to the consumer, and also other aspects of livelihoods, access to education, to health, decent work, and many other things that are important in small-scale fishing communities. These guidelines were developed with the facilitation, I should say, of FAO, but they really, the work was really done by fishers and fish workers themselves, with a lot of help from their organizations and civil society. And then they were negotiated by FAO members to become this international instrument that we can all refer to when we're dealing with small-scale fisheries. And I'm not going to go into all what's in them, but I wanted to show this slide with the key principles of the small-scale fisheries guidelines. And I think many of the things we talk about with regard to co-management also falls within this framework, and how we need to take a lot of maybe perhaps I could say fundamental principles also into the co-management arrangements. And in addition though, the small-scale fisheries guidelines also refer specifically to co-management. The guidelines have several thematic areas, and one key one that is of course then directly related to fisheries is on governance of tenure and resource management. And then in addition, there are thematic areas on the social development, value change, gender, and climate change. But then in the thematic area talking about governance of tenure and resource management, co-management is the recommended approach to fisheries management in small-scale fisheries, building on the principles of participation, consultation, equality, etc. The guidelines also then stress the need for small-scale fishing communities to have secure tenure rights and how small-scale fishing communities should be involved in management. Rights and responsibilities come together, and states should facilitate the participation of small-scale fishing communities in fisheries management. They also say that it's important to have that this is inclusive and it concerns both men and women, whether they are engaged in pre-harvest, harvest, or post-harvest activities. And I think this is an aspect that well, I personally feel one may need to think more about. That often when we talk about co-management, it's very much about the fishers, which of course has a certain logic, but there are also other actors that are directly dependent on the fisheries and who also have knowledge and needs, etc., that should contribute to a co-management arrangement. The small-scale fisheries guidelines, in addition to these principles and then the thematic areas, also has a part on how to achieve an enabling environment for small-scale fisheries governance and development. And one could look at that as well and see what is needed as a way forward also for co-management. Many of these things have been mentioned already, so there's no need maybe to go into details. One of the chapters within this part of the guidelines talk about the need for policy coherence, institutional coordination and collaboration. And we have already talked a bit about the need for appropriate legal frameworks for co-management. And along with that, also the need for institutional structures that allow for participatory processes. Then in this part of the small-scale fisheries guidelines, there's also a chapter on information research and communication. And this has also been mentioned, the need to have information and knowledge that we can use for a successful co-management arrangement. And information and knowledge from not only scientific research, but also traditional knowledge and local knowledge and the contribution of fishing communities themselves, of course. There's also a need to raise awareness and communicate about co-management and why it is important and how it can be done. Then the guidelines talk about the need for capacity development. And we have also heard about, and this goes along with also institutional structures and the need for organizations that can engage in co-management. And we may think more immediately about the need for fishers and fish workers to organize, but it's also important to have the government capacity and the understanding and knowledge to be able to support successful co-management arrangements. This part of the guidelines also talk about the implementation, support and monitoring, and this in the guidelines, it's more talked about the implementation of the guidelines themselves in their entirety. But there are, of course, also things that would apply more specifically to co-management. The need for sharing experiences and good practices, and also to have monitoring and evaluation that we can learn from and how we can apply it through adaptive management. this is my last main slide, and I just wanted to put up a few things that we may want to discuss further. And again, many of these things have been said already and in much better ways than I can present it. So I will keep it a bit short and also focus maybe on aspects that I more personally feel are important and that I would also maybe like to learn more about. I think generally it's important then to promote the sharing of experiences and learning, because I think a lot of things are happening in different locations and in different countries, and we could all benefit from learning from one another. At the same time, we need to recognize that we can't just copy something from one place to another. It really needs to be adapted to local situation and specific circumstances. Among my circles here, I wanted to say again a couple of words of on the two in red, and the one is then on the inclusiveness of men and women, and of including in co-management not only the fishers but also others who are involved in the value chain. And this is maybe a question also to my colleagues in the panel, what they think about this and how this can be achieved and what benefits that could bring, because everybody of course have their own knowledge and needs and can contribute to a system that concerns the community as a whole. The other red circle says holistic approaches include the other livelihood aspects. And that is very much based on the essence maybe of the small-scale fisheries guidelines that look at fisheries in combination with social and economic development, and how you need to look at responsible fishing and fisheries management at the same time as you also look at livelihoods more broadly. And this then would also apply to co-management. And it would be interesting to discuss what aspects or how you could combine social considerations in co-management, and to what extent that should or could be done. And with that, I'd like to say thank you, and also promote a bit our website on the small-scale fisheries guidelines, where we also have a newsletter every month that we are happy to have contributions to when you have activities that are related to the small-scale fisheries guidelines, and where you of course also then can read about what others are doing in this arena. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Lena. Just very quickly, could you give us an idea what kind of projects are now happening in Asia that are supporting the implementation of the SSF guidelines?
Yes, from FAO's side, or from, should I say, from our small-scale fisheries team, because I would have difficulty, of course, to speaking of everybody, because I also know that there are quite a few things happening by countries and by partners. But from our side, we have an SSF umbrella program, which is a global program with activities also to develop tools and guidance for implementing the small-scale fisheries guidelines. And then we have country-level activities in the Philippines and in Myanmar at the moment under this program, where we're looking at, in the Philippines, it's looking at implementing the small-scale fisheries guidelines with a very close link to nutrition and food security. In Myanmar, we are supporting small-scale fisheries organizations due to the current situation. Of course, it's a bit difficult to see how we're going to move forward, but things, there is still support to small-scale fishers, fish worker organizations.
Okay. Thank you very much, Lena. We will go back to the questions that you posed after the other presentations. So it will be good to take the perspective of the other panelists, as you said. Thank you again. And at this stage, now I would like to call on Mr. Chaka Awal, Coordinator for Multilateral Affairs of the Embassy of the Republic of Indonesia, to give us a presentation on the International Year of Artisanal Fisheries and Aquaculture 2022. Mr. Chaka, over to you.
Thank you so much, Susana. Thank you so much for the kind invitation from APFIC and INFOFISH for this very important event. I think this is one of the event by prominent organizers that shows the important role of regional efforts in showcasing best practices and lessons learned regarding co-management in Asia. As per the request for us to present the IAFA. What is IAFA? IAFA is the International Year of Artisanal Fisheries and Aquaculture. So my presentation will cover the explanation on the background, objective, until the regional committee. But can I just take your attention to the picture on the screen that we have now, the IAFA picture symbol. You can see that besides the wording itself, in the 2022, the zero, it's the SDG symbol. And then for the pictogram of the IAFA, as you can see, is a portrait of a person. The wavy lines of the figure's hair represent the waves of the water. The nose and mouth created symbolically with the shape of a sailboat. And there is also fish as the eye. And this logo is available in all UN languages. So there you go. You have the symbols of IAFA. Now, let me go to the background. The background itself started in 2016 when the Committee on Fisheries of FAO in 2016 adopted the proposal from our colleagues in the Latin American and Caribbean group, GRULAC, to propose the International Year of Artisanal Fisheries and Aquaculture. So the proposal was adopted in COFI and then to the FAO, and then it was transmitted to the UN in New York. So the UN in 2017, through its resolution, the UNGA, to its resolution number 72, proclaims 2022 becomes the International Year for Artisanal Fisheries and Aquaculture. And FAO will lead the implementation of these international years. So let's see the objective of the IAFA itself. There are two objectives: to enhance global awareness, of course, and action, and to trigger action to support the contribution of small-scale artisanal fisheries and aquaculture to sustainable development. And the second one, to promote dialogue and collaboration between and among small-scale artisanal fisheries, fish farmers, fish workers, and others stakeholders along the value chain. This means that the voice of small-scale producers can therefore influence the policy, the policy making, as well as the decision making at all levels. Now, how to manage the IAFA? The IAFA is managed through two mechanisms. First, of course, the FAO IAFA Secretariat, which has been very excellent in providing reports, preparing the meetings of the steering group, informed decision-making process. But the second one, the International Steering Committee, is the decision body mechanism. It guides, it assists, and mobilizes political and financial support. The ISC, the steering committee, consists of the FAO members and non-state actors. As for the members, there are 7 member nations representing each regional grouping of the FAO. From Asia is Indonesia. We have Tanzania from Africa, from Europe, Spain, from GRULAC, Latin America, Peru, and they also become the chair of the steering committee. And then from Near East is Kuwait, USA for North America, and South Pacific from Kiribati. There are 10 non-state organizations that becomes the members of the steering group that we feel that hopefully it can represent all stakeholders in small-scale artisanal fisheries and aquaculture. Now, what do we do, the International Committee? Mainly, this is the substantive issue that we are discussing now. We are drafting a global action plan, or we call it GAP. What is GAP? It's a guiding document that contains indicative activities under 7 key pillars. What are the 7 key pillars? You'll see in the next slide. But let's see why we have this GAP. It should provide inspiration or to trigger action in the grassroots level, in many levels, not only grassroots, but also national, local, as well as regional. Where it is at local, national, regional, international, it can be used by all the relevant parties and stakeholders. It can be applied as soon as possible, not have to wait until 2022, but it can start from now, and as well as to be done after 2022. How it will be implemented through available resources, local and national context, depends on the capacity and interest, and also in accordance with international events, celebration, and milestones. Next, we will have IAFA pillars. There are 7 pillars under IAFA GAP, the action plan. We can see that environmental sustainability, economic sustainability, social sustainability, or we call it the three dimension of SDG. We have also governance pillar, gender and equality, food security and nutrition, as well as the last one is resilience. Those pillars are interrelated and interdependent. They are interconnected and should be treated in a balanced manner. The order of the pillars are not representing an order priority. All are the priorities of IAFA. What are the expected outcomes? The outcomes that are expected from the implementation of the GAP are 4 interlinkages outcome: raise awareness, strengthen science policy interface, partnership, empower stakeholders. How this translated into the content of the GAP? We can see that, for example, let me take the example of economic sustainability. We discussed that the outcome can be an inclusive value chain for small-scale artisanal fisheries, and aquaculture are supported to increase participation and adequate remuneration and income-generating activities, particularly for youth and women. So from this outcome, we make it more doable through indicative activities. If we see that there are 4 goals, outcome for awareness raising outcome, the activities can be case study how small-scale fisheries and aquaculture can help local economies in various communication platforms. In terms of science policy interface, the activities can be policy reviews through participatory approaches. In terms of empowering stakeholders, the activities can be the formation of small-scale artisanal fisheries and aquaculture association for economic purposes. And in terms of partnership, it can be the business facilitation, diversification for small scale fisheries and aquaculture. These documents are living documents, so it can be updated at any time. Should there is a need to add the elements, in particular in terms of the activities that can be done on the ground. Now for the roadmap. After we have done a lot of work in the IC, what we plan is through a regular meeting of the steering committees. It meets regularly every 2 or 3 months, and then we call it IAFA milestone, in which we will spread the news. We will hold events on the importance and inviting other stakeholders to contribute to the IAFA. For example, the milestones are the next coffee subcommittee in aquaculture in November, and there will be an official launch of IAFA in World Fishery Days on the 21st of November, and there will be a coffee session, 35th session in September next year, and the last one is we plan to have a concluding event of IAFA next year in Peru in the 2022. We also make use of the existing UN decades. There are quite several UN decades that are in conjunction with IAFA. For example, UN decade of family farming, UN decade of action on nutrition, UN decade of ocean science for sustainable development, and UN decade on ecosystem restoration. So we align ourselves to those UN decades. And the last one, we also align ourselves to the regional and international events and conferences that can be used to inform, to socialize, to disseminate information about IAFA, and to invite the collaboration in that year. All right, now for the challenges, it is not our, we are realistic of the challenges that we face. First, it's about the monitoring of the success of IAFA. Of course, this is because this is about small scale fisheries, artisanal fisheries, and aquaculture. We have to see the impact on the ground. That's the challenge in itself. While we can probably measure some indicators quantitatively, but qualitatively we have also to measure in terms of the impact on the ground. The second one is resource mobilization. We understand that this is difficult time. This is difficult time of pandemic. So perhaps the resource are limited or is allocated to the pandemic alleviation efforts. So we have to be realistic, but then we try to be also creative. For example, Indonesia is looking how to provide in-kind contribution to IAFA and how to integrate IAFA messages in our policy and activities in the fisheries and aquaculture sector. So we have to be a bit more creative in that. Of course, the last challenges that we can identify is the new normal. Because of the pandemic, we have to do a lot of meetings through virtual mode. So we have to be able to adapt this, whether to have a virtual mode or hybrid mode for our activities. And to conclude, I just want to put forward an idea of how we regional can contribute to IAFA. We are thinking of the idea of regional, having a regional committee, because I think it is important because the challenge, one of the big challenge is to monitor the implementation on the ground and to guarantee effective promotion of the role of small-scale fishers and workers. We have a lesson learned or experience from our friends in the Latin America. They have established Western Central Atlantic Coordination Committee for IAFA. That regional committee is helping us in terms of leading the region efforts to implement IAFA in 2022. For example, they plan to have IAFA award or certificate identifying IAFA champions and awareness campaign. So I think that can be the source of inspiration for the important regional actor in Asia on this issue. And of course, Indonesia, rest assured, Indonesia is ready to support political support to realize this further. That will conclude my presentation. Thank you so much for the opportunity. Terima kasih. Get back to you. I'll give it back to you, Susana. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chaka, and thank you for the information about the plans that Indonesia has for the International Year, as well as the idea of having a regional committee for the celebration of IAFA, like what you said, the Latin America is already doing. And we hope that the countries who are here in the audience would be able to take it up and begin the awareness about IAFA 2022. So thank you to you and Ms. Nona for being here with us to share and encourage member countries and other stakeholders and our small-scale fisheries stakeholders to take on the challenge of celebrating IAFA 2022. So at this stage, now I would like to open the floor to the Q&A, and most of the questions already have been responded to in the Q&A box. So I propose to go back to the question earlier posed by Pip in her last slide, and we go to the first question. And I would like to get the perspective from our panelists on the first one. And this is, what are the priority areas in which we need to generate critical reflection and support to improve co-management? So if we can go around the panel members to have a response on this question. Who goes first? How about John? John, you are on mute.
You're muted, yeah.
Can you hear now?
Yes, very clear.
Yes. Well, I would pitch for some arrangement where, we can move towards suggestion that legal frameworks are important and necessary. Because if you take the example of Cambodia, which is the only place where there has been widespread, acceptance of this kind of co-management initiative in which several partners are involved. It's not just the community and the government, but sometimes you have NGOs are present in many places. So that is become possible because of a legal framework. Without a legal framework, you can work in one village, two villages, and it's very specific to that. And when there is some opposition, the whole thing breaks down. When you have a legal framework, it provides for what are the possibilities for conflict resolution and things like this, which is very important, because co-management conflict is inherent in it. So if conflict is the source for it to die, that's very unfortunate. Because conflict also comes when there is success. So because there is somebody who is jealous about the success of co-management. So you have this again. Maybe some people involved in the marketing of the fish. Maybe some landowners who have land in the riparian areas. Things like that. So I would say that somehow, especially in this year when we are thinking about the IAFA, that that should become one of the important messages, I feel.
Okay. Thank you, John. Other panelists? Sebastian, I see your, please.
Thanks, Susana. I mean, I have a couple of points.
Sebastian, your mic. Please speak to the mic.
Yeah, the one issue is that there needs to be much greater awareness raising about the benefits of co-management, because even the participation in this meeting, for example, doesn't have any small-scale fishing community representative. So I think, therefore, there is always this fear when the idea of co-management comes from above. So I think to create sufficient ownership from below is very important. And for that, we need to identify, some of the existing structures and arrangements and try to build upon them and demonstrate to the communities that there are tangible benefits to them from co-management. Therefore, it is not an arrangement to pass all the responsibility to the community, and then the benefits are not very clearly given to the community. Therefore, that mismatch is there. And second point I would like to make is that from my survey, I noticed that in developed countries with very formal legal structures, co-management is more robust than in countries with very loose legal structures. So therefore, we have very informal arrangements. The relationship between the state and the community has to be much more, kind of based on, as John said, trust. And so that if once there is a trust, perhaps there will be more kind of owning up to co-management structures and systems from the community itself. So I think that confidence has to be further developed, and for that, probably we can use human rights-based approach and recognizing tenure rights, and they should feel that their social development, that their interests are at heart of these initiatives. I think then slowly we can try to approach the sustainable development from the social portal among the three. I think that might help to even bring benefits to environmental benefits and economic benefits. Yeah.
Thank you, Sebastian. Other members of the panel?
Susana, if I may?
Yeah, please go ahead, Lena.
Yeah, no, I wanted to bring up inclusiveness and gender equality as another critical area where we may need some reflection. And as I briefly mentioned, that co-management, it tends to be with fishers because they are fishing, and a lot of logic there. But I do think we need to think about how other people along the value chain that are also very dependent on sustainable management of the resources can be involved and contribute and also benefit from co-management arrangements. And often women are involved in the post-harvest sector. That's not always the case, and one shouldn't generalize, but if we generalize anyway, that's often the case. And I think there needs to be some reflection on how we make sure that post-harvest workers, women, are also benefiting and included in co-management and contributing their knowledge on market demand and so on, which are critical for sustainable management as well. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. Pip, you were the you led the review, and it would be good to have your take on this as well. Which do you think?
Oh, I was hoping because I asked the question, I wouldn't have to add. But no, I mean, I agree with the responses that were put forward. I think I see maybe one of the challenges is that, and maybe this touches on what John was saying, that if co-management is a site by site or piece by piece or location or very localized, and it's not really a movement or an approach that's put forward as this is how the nation will be addressing issues of water, food security, food sovereignty, land rights, you know, rights to water, rights to space, rights to fisheries resource. I think that co-management will be pushed, you know, pushed around in kind of a storm of you know, demands and competition for resources. So, you know, I think a little about, so my experience more on the ground with a more community-based form of co-management is in Solomon Islands, where the national governments and communities put forward that in a large initiative that was being presented to them, the Coral Triangle Initiative, that community-based forms of co-management would be the vehicle that they would use to address and implement that initiative. So I think that presents a really nice example. And I think, you know, the presentation about the International Year of Artisanal Fisheries and Aquaculture gives that same opportunity to say, you know, for us to say, for countries and for fisher groups to say, you know, where is co-management in addressing the Sustainable Development Goals? Will it be a primary vehicle through which the Sustainable Development Goals should be achieved? So I think that might be a challenge of bringing things up from kind of piecemeal to, you know, national movements of presenting this as a principal approach that's very front-footed yeah, very front-footed in the way that it says global agendas or regional agendas or initiatives will be addressed. And I think that reinforces what John and Sebastian were saying.
Thank you, Pip. I think Kim, yeah, Kim, we would be glad to hear your take on this, on the priority to improve co-management.
Yes, thank you very much. I give the example from Cambodia again. This after we implement the co-management 20 years, so with the support from the legal framework, so the implementation of the legal framework, now we are underway to amendment the legal framework. So this is very important. As Professor John Korean mentioned, the legal framework is very important in the process of the co-management arrangement and legal recognition from the government and the structure of the co-management. So this is very important. So in case in Cambodia, we will improve the legal framework according to our experience after the implementation of the 20 years. So this is very important. Meanwhile, the capacity building of local co-manager who are small-scale fisher and local authority in the local area is still needed for their capacity building in order to ensure their leadership and commitment and participation, and to give high prioritize that their value is very important in the resource management, as they are equally co-manager of their resources. So this is very important in order to sustain their resources for the utilization and the for their next generation. This is very important, and for the benefit sharing and economic lease benefit from their resource that they co-manage and sustain for their next generation. And then the involvement of women involvement is highlighted in Cambodia, especially women is very important as well, especially regarding with the conservation activity. They highlight that women who are not at home next to their, especially in the floating village, women who are stay at home and they can keep eye contact in their conservation zone, and also the education to their member, to their children, for their, for the knowledge of the resource management, and also the youth as well. They are willing to involve in this management. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much. So, well, I have based on the responses, the legal framework is very important, and Kim also said even amendment of the legal framework, awareness raising, the inclusiveness in the value chain, the point by Tip about co-management being a national strategy and not as a piece by piece or something that is like an option, but it should be the option that is preferred for managing. And then the point by Kim on a capacity building of co-managers and involvement of men, women, and youth. We are actually going towards the end. I see that the time is now very tight, but I just would like one more question. And this refers to the point by Lena on the how can we have the inclusiveness in the co-management, because as Lena mentioned, more often we are thinking of co-management with the fishers, which is one part of the value chain. So how can we be more inclusive in co-management? And I would like our panel to get the perspective of our panel on how we can do this. Please, I mean, very briefly before we end the webinar, it would be good to hear what actions could be taken, because the interest of these value chain actors may actually be at odds with each other. So I mean, Lena's point about inclusiveness, how we can do it. Who wants to go first? John, I see that your mic is already on. Please.
Oh, sorry. I didn't.
No, it's okay.
It was not with the intention of speaking first. But since you have asked,
yes,
I think co-management will succeed only if the community is also involved. Co-management will not succeed if it is only between fishers and government and NGO. The community, the youth, the women have to be involved. I mean, and if in Cambodia, if you look at the successful examples, and I think Kim will stand by me on this, it is where women and the youth and others are, fully involved, that you have success. Or the other way around, if you look at a successful co-management initiative, you can be sure that there are women behind it, that there are youth who are involved. So the involvement of community is very integral. So if something starts as a community initiative, it's a better chance that it will succeed as a co-management initiative.
Okay. Other panel? Who wants to go?
No, can I speak? Yeah.
Yes, please. Yes.
Yeah. 2 points. One is that I think the FAO FIMSUL project talks about proper stakeholder analysis. I think that's important to identify different stakeholders. And then the second point is that we need to also take into account the fact that there are kind of power relations within community. For example, even that FIMSUL report talks about how the trawler controlled villages are far more dominant than other type of gear groups, village groups in some parts of India. So therefore, we need to also make sure that the co-management arrangement is also standing for equity, not only for efficiency. And so therefore, that needs some proper stakeholder analysis, giving greater protection for the weaker elements within that arrangement, so that they feel more confident to participate in these arrangements. Yeah.
Thank you, Sebastian. Any other panel member who would like to put your take? Yes, please, Pete. Over to you.
Great. Such an important question, because I think the success of co-management really rests on getting that right. And I think it's even broader than, it's broader than women and men. It's about a worldview, and it's about this problem. If you look at something, a complex problem through your narrow lens, so through my Western scientific narrow lens, you only see part of a problem, part of an experience, and a very narrow set of solutions. And I see this as well in the scientific community, which is, we think, the knowledge type that is most important to bring to co-management is quantitative. It's about how many fish are caught, by whom, and there are particular ways of collecting those data, and that is the truth. And that truth will give you the answer for how you need to manage the fishery. And that's going to be a huge problem, because you're only going to have a very narrow solution that isn't fit for a complex system. And that's the same with including multiple perspectives within a community as well. So it's about really thinking about multiple worldviews, multiple positions people are sitting in, and multiple ways of looking at a particular problem. And I think if you really understand that as the foundation of co-management, and working with small-scale fisheries generally, then I think you're more likely to succeed. And I think NGO partners, research partners have a real responsibility, and have perhaps been perpetuators of getting it wrong, because we have this narrow view, and then we perpetuate it with the way we collect data, which reinforces, who's a legitimate stakeholder. And so what Lena was saying is right. We need to stand back and ask the question much more broadly, who has a stake in this resource, in this space, in the multiple resources and values that this space and fishery provide. And then you get a much broader suite of genuine stakeholders.
Thank you. Any other? If no, I think it has been a very good learning experience for everyone. I learned a lot. I mean, I have been reading about co-management as well, but this one is really provided inspiration and nuggets of learning. And I hope that the audience enjoyed the seminar and also learned a lot. It's good that we were, and we hope that, the IAFA 2022 would also be highlighting co-management as part of, management of small-scale fisheries and ensuring its sustainability. So with this, I would like to thank our panelists. I would like to thank the audience for staying. Most importantly, we thank INFOFISH, because without them, we would not be having this webinar. Thank you very much. WorldFish also, WorldFish colleagues. Thank you, everyone. Thank you to the our colleagues from Indonesia for the encouragement to join IAFA. So with this, we wish you a good rest of the day, or a good afternoon, or good evening. And actually, the next schedule for the webinar, which is webinar number 9, is not until December, where we will be talking about gender. So, and as I mentioned, when we have the publication ready, we will request INFOFISH colleagues to send you the link to the publication. So thank you very much. And yes, have a good afternoon and have a good day.